All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 10. And this week, I'm going to be talking about the physiography or the physical geography of Missouri and soil horizonation, which is a way that we name soil layers. So to kick us off, just wanted to talk about the general soil orders of the Midwest here, the most common things that you're likely to find. So when we look at the Midwest, we can see that there are some pretty distinct lines, and there's some colors that we see more often than others. So first, let's start off with this dark green. So that is a mollisol. Now, if you remember back to one of our early lectures, mollisols are kind of like grassland soils. They're plain soils. They have high organic matter accumulation, especially in the surface. Now, up next, we have alpha sols. So alpha sols are kind of this lighter green color. You can see that they're kind of ubiquitous across much of the Midwest here and even on into the South. So alpha sols are forest soils and temperate climatic zones. So you'll see that they're kind of all throughout much of the eastern Midwest and into the South. Then in the Southeast, we have ultisols. Now remember, ultisols are highly weathered soils, which makes sense. Down here in the Southeast, we have lots of rain, lots of warmth. So you get some pretty highly weathered soils. And similarly, you can see a bunch in the southern half of Missouri. Now, the fourth kind that I want to kind of bring to your attention are entisols. Now, entisols are soils that are less pedogenically differentiated. You can see that we've got some spots of that here in Nebraska, but then also down here in Missouri's boot heel, we have a fair number of entisols. So I want to zoom in here on Missouri and talk about how these physiographic regions interact with the soil orders that we end up seeing. So when we look at Missouri, the top half here, the orange and the yellow, are glacial till plains. So now glacial till plains are a result of the glaciers that once covered much of the northern US. So this picture here is kind of the extent of different glaciations that we had. We had huge glaciers that extended down from Canada and the North Pole, basically, and came down, and we have several different glaciations. So in orange here, we have the Wisconsin glaciation. Red is the Illinoisan glaciation. And then in green here, we have the Kansas glaciation. Now, notably right here in Wisconsin and kind of northern Illinois, there's this pocket that was never really glaciated, and that's called the driftless area. But for much of the Midwest, especially the eastern and northern Midwest, as well as a lot of kind of New England and Northeast area, they were once covered by glaciers. So then what that means is that a lot of the parent material here is glacial till. Now, glacial till is what you get when a glacier comes along and it kind of scrapes off whatever geologic material was there, right? Glaciers are huge. They're coming through. They're basically like a snow plow, just picking up everything in their midst. And what ends up happening is when you have something like glacial till, you get kind of all sorts of stuff mixed together. So for example, you'll see here that you've got these rocks that are mixed in with this finer grained soil material, and you have all different sizes. And, you know, these are kind of smaller rocks, but you could definitely get things like boulders, et cetera. You can get all sizes of rocks because glaciers are enormous. And so they kind of take everything with them. They're indiscriminate, and they just kind of mix it all together. And then when the glaciers recede, they leave it there, and it's all, there's not really much rhyme or reason to it. It's just kind of chaotic. So that's kind of what glacial till is. And that's what covers the northern half of Missouri and a lot of the Midwest. Now in southern Missouri, we have something that's called karst. So here we have mainly in the green, but then some of the blue as well is karst here. So what a karst is a really unique environment that harkens back to early on in the semester. Now, early on in the semester, you'll remember that I talked about differential weathering of different parent materials. And karst is actually a good example of what happens with that on a landscape. So the karst in southern Missouri, for example, is full of limestone and dolomite and sandstone kind of mixed together. Now, limestone and dolomite are carbonate-based parent materials. They weather fairly easily. So then what happens is you get water and weathering, that acidic rainwater and that chemical weathering comes in, and it starts getting these cracks in the limestone. The limestone weathers much more easily than, say, volcanic and sedimentary rock around it, which would be the sandstone. So what happens then is you get this differential weathering, and it makes for a really interesting and kind of chaotic landscape. So you get weathering, you get things like sinkholes, and there are caves within it, and then those caves can collapse. And so you get, that's how you get sinkholes and whatnot, but you have lots of water moving through it. And you end up with this karst landscape. Now, this karst in southern Missouri is really, really old. It's part of the original tectonic plate, like North American tectonic plate, the craton, or as they call it, Laurentia. So this is really, really old parent material that has been deposited there and has had these differential weathering processes happening to it over time, over and over and over. And so it gives us pretty unique soil patterns in southern Missouri. Now, the third region of Missouri that I want to kind of bring your focus to is alluvium. Now, alluvium is it's like these continuous deposits of fine-grained particles, and usually from a river or a stream or something like that. Now, the Boot Heel of Missouri down here is really unique because it's at the confluence of several enormous rivers here in the US. So down here is the Boot Heel. And so I want to just show you exactly what's coming together here. So from the northeast, we have the Ohio River, which has its roots, its headwaters all the way up in New York and Pennsylvania. So as that river is coming down this way, we have the Tennessee, and it's all kind of coming together here in the Boot Heel. It's meeting the Missouri River, which is coming from all the way up here in like Montana and Wyoming and stuff. And that comes all the way down, meets up with the Mississippi, and those huge waterways kind of come together here in the Boot Heel. Now, when you have these waterways coming together, they're carrying with them silt and sediments. Now, if you remember from lab, when we mixed up the different particle sizes, sand filtered out first, it settled out, and silt and clay were still being carried with the water, right? Those were easily dispersed, easily carried by the water. And so what happens is when these different waters come together, they start to deposit these particles here in the Boot Heel. Now, what ends up happening then is you get this alluvium, and you can get several different layers of soil kind of layered on top of one another. So this is an example of alluvium. And you can see kind of 3 different times where they got huge deposits of different parent material. And this is a pretty distinct layering here of when these more fine-grained particles were deposited. So that gives us some pretty distinct patterns of soil orders. So in the Northwest here, we tend to have mollisols. Now remember, mollisols are kind of semi-arid soils, and that's because there's a difference in rainfall from the West. The West is drier than the eastern side of the US, and Missouri is kind of sitting at the crossroads of that. So what that means is in the Northeast here, we have more of these alpha sols, right? Alpha sols are more temperate soils, and they usually have a bit more forest, et cetera, to help those develop. In the South now, remember, we had really old landscape from that original tectonic plate in the US. And so because they've been around for a while and they've had a lot of rainfall and it's pretty warm, you get ultisols, well-weathered soils in southern Missouri. Now, uniquely down in the Boot Heel, we get entisols. Now, remember, entisols are weakly differentiated soils, And that's because we keep getting these deposits here of varying parent material. That alluvium keeps coming in. So there hasn't been a lot of time for those soils to develop distinct horizons. Now, what are soil horizons? This is something we've kind of been alluding to throughout the semester, but it's time to start really digging into that. So soil horizons are different layers within the soil. And at the top of the soil, we usually have what's called an O horizon. Now, an O horizon is the accumulation of organic material. That accumulation of organic material usually results in darkening, and you can get like just leaves or pine needles or what have you, or grass or something like that. And it's just accumulated organic matter that's just kind of sitting on top of the soil and is in varying layers of decomposition. Now, it's important to note that that is almost purely organic material and it's not mineral material, because once you get mineral material, you start to get an A horizon. Now, an A horizon is that well-mixed organic and mineral material, and it makes it so the A horizon here is, is darker because that organic matter is mixed in with the mineral, but it's not the darkest of the O horizon here. Below that, you can get an E horizon. Now, an E horizon stands for the zone of maximum eluviation. Now, remember, eluviation is one of our 4 soil forming processes. And so with eluviation, what we have is we have the loss of things. And so with that loss of material, things like different minerals, iron and aluminum, et cetera, you get this lightening of your E horizon. Now, with eluviation, we have to have a zone of illuviation, which is our B horizon. Now, the B horizon, like I said, is where illuviation happens, where things start to accumulate. And with that accumulation, you start to get pedogenesis, or the soil forming processes happening here in the B horizon. Then we get down to the C horizon. Now, the C horizon down here is basically just your parent material. You can see that this is what the soil is formed from. And, there hasn't been a lot of pedogenic processes, not a lot of soil formation has happened to that parent material. Now, in some soils, you can get down to an R horizon. Now, an R horizon is basically just bedrock. These aren't very common to see because it's just hard to dig through bedrock, but we do have a name for it. Now, it's important to note that each of these horizons has been differentiated due to 4 soil forming processes, right? So for example, if we look up here at the O horizon, that would be the additions, right? We are getting added organic matter on the top of the soil. E, remember, eluviation is one of our another process. And we have illuviation, or translocation, if you want to say. B horizon is also where we get transformation. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And these are our 4 soil forming processes. Now, not all of these horizons exist in all soils. For example, O horizons don't happen in a lot of soils. Same with E horizons, and C and R, you might not see those in the top 200 centimeters of our pedon. So not all of these horizons exist. Don't expect to see all of those, but it is good to know kind of this predictable pattern that might happen. Now, we have horizons, but then we also have subordinate horizons. We want to further differentiate between types of these kind of higher level horizons. So for example, I'm gonna run through a couple of these, but there's a whole lot. There's dozens of subordinate horizons, and this is where we get a lot of information about what these kind of higher level horizons mean. So for example, with our O horizon, we can get these modifiers on it. So we can get A, E, and I. So we would say that it's an OA horizon, or an OE, or an OI. Now, what these stand for, I'll spare you for right now, but needless to say that these indicate a degree of decomposition. So an A is the most decomposed of an O horizon. So an OA would be the most decomposed. An OI would be the least decomposed. And an OE is the kind of in the middle. Then we can have an A horizon. Now, an A horizon, the most common modifier that it gets as a subordinate designation is P. Now, P stands for plowing. And so what an AP horizon is usually a loss of soil structure, but you can tell that it's still that intimate mixture of mineral and organic material, just that it's been changed by plowing or more generally just disturbance. An E horizon doesn't get any subordinate designation, but a B horizon does. Now, B horizons always get some sort of designation, right? That is where a lot of petagenesis is happening. This is where a lot of the action is down in your B horizons. You can get dozens of different combinations of letters within B horizons, but I'm going to focus on two here. So the first one is a W horizon, and the second one is a T horizon. Now, a W horizon, I think of it as weak differentiation of the B horizon. That means very little petagenesis has happened, but it's starting to happen. T stands for the accumulation of clay. There's the word Tonne, T-O-N-N-E, which is the German word for clay. And so because Germans were very prominent in early soils designations, we have T to indicate the accumulation of clay in that subsurface. Like I said, there are dozens of other subordinate horizons that we can get within a B, but these are two of the most common that you'll see, especially here in Missouri. And these are also some of the most straightforward to understand. A C horizon, we can get an R subordinate designation. Now, R stands for decomposing rock, which we call saprolite. So saprolite is a really interesting thing. When you find it, it looks like a rock, but then when you pick it up and squeeze it, it just crumbles in your hand like it's soil. So that's how you know that you've found saprolite. And now we designate it by little r because it's basically bedrock that's starting to decompose, which is what we call our parent material. Our horizons don't have any designations, subordinate designations, because our horizons aren't particularly common. And also there's no, almost by definition, there is no real petagenesis happening there. So as a quick review, we have three major depositional environments in Missouri, three different ways that parent material has been deposited. So up in the north, we have the glacial till plains. So these are younger, more recent deposits. They're a little less weathered, and they have really mixed particle sizes. Everything from boulders to clay is all kind of intermixed. This gives us mollisols and alphasols. Mollisols in the west, which is slightly more arid, and alphasols in the east, which are slightly wetter. In the south, we have karst, which is lots of limestone and sandstone intermixed, and dolomite. And these are much older deposits. So these have been around since the North American plate collided with the South American plate. And so we have variable weathering of those parent materials, and we have erosion and all these different processes. And that has given us ultisols, highly weathered soils. Then in the southeast, in the boot heel, we have alluvial deposits. So we have continual deposits of silt and clay from various large rivers that are coming together right there in the boot heel. And it gives us lots of deposits of fine grained particles, but not a lot of chance for petagenesis to start happening, sorry. And so we have entisols in the southeast here. Now, when we have those soil orders, we need to describe what's going on within them to help classify them. And so we use soil horizons and their accompanying subordinate designations. Remember, not all soil horizons need to happen in all soils, and not all subordinate designations always exist there. So an O horizon is for accumulated organic material, and it can get subordinate designations of A, E, and I to give us the degree of decomposition of that organic material. Then we have an A horizon, which is intermixed organic and mineral material. It's usually darkened, and A horizons can get the moniker of P as a subordinate designation to disturb or to designate disturbance, usually by plowing in an agricultural field. An E horizon is the zone of maximum eluviation, the movement of mineral and pigmentation into our B horizon, which is our zone of maximum illuviation, or where the things accumulate. B horizons need to have a subordinate designation, and there are dozens that we can see, but the most common ones that we'll see are a W and a T. A W subordinate designation means weak differentiation or petagenesis, and T means the accumulation of clay. Then we have a C, which is parent material, and that parent material is undifferentiated, but C can have an R designation, which indicates saprolite. Saprolite meaning decomposing bedrock. And that's a kind of throwback to our R horizon, which again are not very common, but that indicates bedrock. All right, and with that, thank you, and looking forward to seeing you out in the soil pits this week.